JKB back with my review for Far Cry New Dawn. This review will have minor spoilers. Far Cry New Dawn came off as a strange title when it was first revealed. A lot of people thought it was Ubisoft trying to lift the gameplay and story elements of Bethesda's Fallout series due to the fact that this is a direct sequel set 17 years after the end of Far Cry 5 in a post-apocalyptic world. I wasn't sure how I felt about the whole idea. I'm a huge fan of RPGs, so naturally I was excited to hear that Ubisoft would be introducing more RPG elements into the gameplay mechanics. But there was also this Mad Max tone with all of the trailers that were coming out, and for the most part, Far Cry New Dawn isn't really ripping off either Fallout or Mad Max. It's kind of ripping itself off. Ever since Far Cry 3 had one of the strongest villains to date in the franchise, it seems that Ubisoft has tried as hard as possible to really bring the villains to life in new and exciting ways. In Far Cry 5, we were faced with the Father, who was hell-bent on cleaning the sin from the people of Hope County. In Far Cry New Dawn, the world is a bit different. This is a post-apocalyptic land, and it seems that you're either fighting for peace or you're fighting to survive. The story is simple. There's a new order known as the Highwaymen, and this is led by twins known as Mickey and Lou, both of which only know one way to survive. You play as a character that's on the good side, fighting to keep the peace. You also come across a ton of characters in the open world, some of which are absolutely goofy. But at the end, it's hard to not look at this story and not see this as an extension of Far Cry 5. There's a few very touching moments that I had with the game, but the main villains never reached the same level of the past games in the series. However, comparing this game to other games in the same genre, they've done a really good job with the main villains. The intro mission of the game really sets the overall tone of the world, and I was very impressed with the great atmosphere right from the start of the story. And as you know, I don't like to get into the plot points of a story, but I will say if you've watched the trailer, expect to run into a few of the Far Cry 5 characters that you know and love. Overall, again, the story is something I think you should experience if you're a huge Far Cry 5 fan, because this, again, really is an extension of that story set 17 years in the future. The villains, they're not that great, but they're passable. I'll give this story a solid pass, but I mean, really, is this supposed to be a full game, or is it supposed to be an extension of Far Cry 5? I think it is the latter.
Get on that big gun in the back.
Visually, New Dawn is remarkable on my Xbox One X in 4K, and even more so on my PC. The standout visual is the lighting system. The team should be proud of what they've accomplished here. There's a day and night cycle that completely changes the tone of the whole game. Characters do, however, seem to have a little bit of a hit and miss in terms of the facial design work in the game. It seems a little dated at times. The environments are absolutely stunning, with plants that have overtaken old buildings and roadways. The world is extremely detailed, and I think it is one of the most standout factors in the game, and that's why you should even play this game. It's on par with Far Cry 5 in terms of its visuals, if not even better at times due to the lighting systems. The first new feature that you'll notice that's tied into the light RPG elements is the ability to create a limited customized character. You can pick between the two genders and design them however you like, with the offering options. The main gameplay is centered around a base camp of sorts. Within the base camp known as Prosperity, there's facilities that you need to upgrade to level them up. You do this by going out into the world and collecting items. There's one very important item, and that is ethanol. This is the main way to upgrade the facilities in your base. This is where the RPG elements come into play. You'll be able to do it however you like. If you want to focus all your efforts on simply upgrading the facility for weapons, you can do that. Weapons in the game are not only made by crafting them, but you'll find parts around the world that will kind of introduce you to new weapons as you go along in the story, and you can also take weapons from fallen enemies as you take down outposts and blockades in the game. Gunplay is as good as it ever was in Far Cry 5. The weapon types are all very interesting to look at because they have these crafted sensibilities about them. They're all made from random gun parts and parts you find around the environment. The design of the weapons is right out of a Mad Max film, yet for the most part, you'll do the exact same thing you did with past weapons from the franchise. A shotgun is still a shotgun, it just happens to look much cooler. Driving still isn't perfect in the Far Cry games, and it can be very frustrating at times due to the way the battle system is worked into the driving itself. You can set the car to auto drive, which is useful in a shootout with another car. However, it's still very hard to hit the enemies while you're in a moving vehicle. Enemies are as smart as the enemies were in Far Cry 5. I'm going to say that the game does feel a little bit more like The Division in terms of the enemy types. It's not extremely impressive AI, however, it's challenging enough to want to use a strategy when facing different scenarios in the game. The weapons and the enemies have 4 different levels, with level 4 being incredibly hard to take down. It seems that the game has borrowed a few tricks from Ubisoft's The Division. The enemies now have health meters above them by default and at all times, and they are also color coded to tell you exactly how tough they will be. I love this in the game because I knew what I was getting into with each situation that brought itself forth. And I needed to be a little cautious if I needed a little extra firepower before I tried to take down an outpost. Weapons are tied into the same color-coded system. I had a blast trying to upgrade my weapons to get to the next level to be able to take down another outpost that was 1 level higher than I was with the weapons I was currently holding. It's an absolute blast upgrading in this game. One of the coolest ideas in the game is when you clear out an outpost now, you're able to make a choice to let the enemies take over the outpost right away. It's kind of like going back into the outpost, but at a higher level. The enemies will be much more difficult and you jump right back into the action. But it won't play out the same way because the enemies will be more powerful and even have different gear. It's all about the choice. You don't have to do this for the 21 outposts, but each of them can be redone with tougher enemies right away, and that was just a welcome addition to this version of the game. Perks are tied into the challenges in the game, and the perks that you get are as you would expect, but with a little deeper investigating into the game. I don't want to spoil anything here. They get to be ridiculous, and again, I'm not going to ruin any of that in this review, but once you unlock these special perks, the gameplay becomes even better in ways that you can't even imagine in a Far Cry game. Now, in terms of gameplay, I have one minor negative to bring up. The first car combat mission in the game, where you have to escape with an NPC driver, was absolutely horrible because the audio wasn't lining up with the actions that I was seeing on screen. It was extremely frustrating to have a character that was yelling out that somebody was coming up from the right side of the car, only to look over and see nothing. He did this the whole mission. I had to constantly keep the camera spinning around just to make sure I saw where enemies were actually coming from. I should also bring up the game does have a photo mode with all the usual tools. However, at least in my version of the game, which is a review copy, they have really restricted how close you can get to the character's face in photo mode, and that might frustrate some of you out there. The coolest part of the game, in my opinion, is the expeditions. These are missions where you leave the usual open world map and go to these new locations via helicopter, And it's absolutely insane because it changes the whole gameplay mechanic of Far Cry. Yes, it's the same gameplay mechanics, but the idea here is simple. There's a package you need to recover from the world. There's a GPS marker that's attached to this package, so when you pick it up, you have seconds to escape out of the area and to the extraction point. But sometimes making it back to the helicopter can be completely tricky because enemies know your exact location on the map. I'm extremely impressed with these side missions. The idea that there's these other locations around the giant overall map really opens up the whole game. Each of the expedition missions can also be played over and over with harder enemy types. This was one of my favorite parts of the game, and I hope they keep this idea going because it felt fresh and new. The idea is quite simple. You get dropped off in a self-contained map, you find the package, and you gotta get out. I mean, it's just amazing design work, and I really feel like it kind of felt like something completely new to the franchise, and I'm so happy about that. Hunting isn't tied into the game as much as it was in past games. You'll collect animal skins for trade for parts to build new weapons. There's this one interesting part here that is gross in one sense, that the animals seem to be, kind of exposed from radiation due to the blast that happened 17 years ago, and they've all mutated. So you'll come across some really disgusting mutated bears and other crazy wildlife. The guns for hire mechanic is back, and this time there's a ton of options. You can go with a dog that'll get in the car now when you speed off by jumping through the window, and there's even this giant warthog that's absolutely adorable. I should also say, if you have an issue with killing animals in video games, get ready because you'll be killing a lot of wild dogs, which wasn't exactly fun at times because they scream in pain. But I mean, it's a video game, so I can handle it, but some of you may not. I should point out that I did come across a few glitches that caused my character to fall through the map. Nothing really game-breaking, but overall, my 27 hours plus, I had to reload the game a few times. Lastly, I want to bring up something that I found kind of interesting. Far Cry New Dawn enemies won't stop playing really hardcore hip-hop music from the outposts. Their cars, even radios that are just sitting around the world seem to be playing this really hardcore rap music. That's one of the tones to this game. So if you can't stand hip-hop, you'll have a blast blowing up all of the cars and kicking in the radios. Personally, in my opinion, it's great. It's new to the Far Cry world, and it fits in with the mentality of the villains. The rest of the score to the game is very well done, and you get a sense of fear at times from the music.
I see you!
Far Cry New Dawn may not have all the features of a mainline game in the series, and it may only run around 25 to 30 hours depending on how you play the game, but the price is right when it comes down to being about half the size of a usual release. There's also co-op in the game that works the exact same way it did in Part 5, so it's even better to play with a friend. The characters are as good as they've been in the past, but the villains aren't as good as the past games. The game looks stunning at times, and the RPG elements are a welcome improvement. The expeditions stand out as my favorite part of the game. Those almost had a feeling of being sort of part of a Splinter Cell's universe due to the objective of each of those missions. You get in, you get out, try not to make any noise. I mean, it really fits into the idea of Splinter Cell, and I absolutely love those. The world map is exactly the same as Far Cry 5, but everything is obviously overtaken by nature. You'll see landmarks from the past and even a few characters, but I think Ubisoft was trying to experiment with the idea of introducing more RPG elements into this game, and I think it worked out perfectly, and in the future, I'd love to see even more of these RPG elements amplified. The game felt a little better with them in it. I'd like to see them take this to an extreme in the future. For the price and how much you get out of it, I highly recommend the game, and I'm going to give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. Some may argue it's more of the same, but why fix what's not broken? The RPG elements are so welcome in this, and I hope they continue to play around with this formula. For more reviews, please consider subscribing to my show, and I'll see you in the next episode of JKB.